Recent studies show that 1/4 of all African American males between the ages of 20 and 29 fall by the wayside. They're either filling these stone cages or they're on parole. Some black leaders call for separating the races as the best solution. Others look beyond the cul-de-sac of bigotry and find another road. New York Congressman Major Owens looks at motivation first.
Young males, as contrasted to females, become embittered and they resent their state of poverty in a nation that has plenty, and they act out. They seek ways to deal with the situation, and they're not dealt with by adults or the education system in a proper way. So one thing adds to another, and you have a situation where by the time they're teenagers, they're so hostile that inevitably they get into trouble with the law.
The congressman sees poor black males as especially vulnerable to biased law enforcement.
We have a compounding of this conflict with society to the point where they get into trouble with the law, and the law is not very humane because they get locked up a lot of times for things that the racism comes in, the discrimination factor. Young males get locked, African-American males get locked up for joyriding in a car. It's called stealing, auto theft. In the suburbs, if young whites do that, it's joyriding. And on it goes. I can give you many examples where conflicts with the law, instead of counseling, instead of doing the kinds of things that they do with white youngsters.
But NAACP President Benjamin Hooks insists that the black community must start looking to themselves for answers as opposed to crying racism.
I'd say Ben Hooks is right 1/3 of the way. 1/3 of the answer has to come from within the black community. We have to deal with our own internal structure and lean back on some strengths that once were there 25 years ago and try to rebuild those community strengths and family strengths. 2/3 of it is public policy. And, you know, public policy which must provide jobs and opportunity and the education necessary to qualify the youngsters for those jobs. Our public policy has not dealt with people who don't have opportunity. We have an education system which is not adequate to deal with the problems, not even educating middle-class youngsters well, so you can imagine what's happening to the poor ones. And we don't deal with those problems sufficient to allow youngsters to qualify for the jobs that are available.
To halt the growing number of black males either in prison or on the streets, Owens intends to sell Congress on establishing a multi-million-dollar federal research and development entity.
Whatever is necessary to do the job has to be done, just as the Pentagon, the defense budget, whatever is necessary, they do it. So we have a multi-billion-dollar defense program. If it's necessary in order to make sure that everybody has access to opportunity and education so they can qualify for a job, then let us do that.
Why not pass some legislation that more directly copes with the problem instead of investing money in yet another research plan? Let the black community have something in which they can sink their teeth right away.
Research and development program is not something so lofty. It's not an ivory tower concept. It's just trying to figure out what works, and the federal government wants to find out, pinpoint what works, and tell other people, do what works. We will find ways to encourage you to do what works. Kids
so you're saying thus far there really hasn't been this kind of a feasibility study?
They've been failing. It's not one study. It's thousands of studies that are needed and thousands of demonstration projects that ought to be identified and replicated.
I guess I'm trying to put myself in the position of the black viewer, if you will, for a moment. A person who listens to you and says, this is all very well and fine, but I need some answers today. All right, my children need some answers today.
There are plenty of people who will give them answers today. They will say, all we need is an Afrocentric curriculum. If the youngsters study about their African background, their heritage, that'll make everything all right. Well, I'm not so sure that's going to help them learn math, science, and how to get along in the world.
Congressman Owens feels that he has a genuine shot at having his legislation passed. Unfortunately, the budget deficit hawks might have other things in mind. For the Insiders, this is Alan Nathan.